Hey, this is Kyle at Projection Hub, and today I'm going to show you how to create a business plan for a nonprofit organization that you're trying to launch. And so what I'm going to do today is using this free business plan template, which is available down in the description below. You can grab it, no strings attached. I'm going to basically use this as a guide. We're going to go through here, talk about the structure of the business plan. It's pre-filled out with a fictitious nonprofit example, so we can use that as a starting point. And you can use that as a starting point when you're building your own business plan to have kind of a reference point when you're filling that out. And so my goal, though, is as we're going through this, I'm going to highlight 5 key points that you should really try and make sure you get nailed down in your business plan. So if you need to secure some funding, whether that's even a loan or you have potential donors or whoever that want to see the business plan, you can show that to them and make a compelling case. And so obviously this video is going to be a little bit different because business plans are very common for for-profit businesses. Projections are very common for for-profit businesses, and it's all about your target market and attracting that customer base, and everything's a little bit different for a nonprofit. And so I'm going to do my best to outline some tips and tricks here. So who is Projection Hub? We've helped more than 50,000 businesses, organizations, founders, business owners create financial projections for their ventures, for loan applications, for business plans, for pitch decks. And so we've helped several nonprofits create their financial models for their organizations and for their endeavors and their campaigns. And who am I? As mentioned, my name is Kyle. Before this, I spent 7 years as a lender, a small business lender. During that my time, admittedly, I didn't work on many loans for nonprofits, but the organization I worked for was a nonprofit and was very transparent with their operations and how we managed things and how we ran the business and grew that organization. And so just having some context from there in both of these careers that I think will be helpful, and just having a lot of experience from for-profit businesses that I do think applies to the management and the growth of nonprofits. There's just some nuances there. So if at any point you like this content, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you'd like to get more information, kind of like this one, and we'll go ahead and jump in. Okay, so why is your business plan important? Again, the stakes are a little bit different than a for-profit business. And so, if the goal and the purpose is very missional and is very pragmatic, we're less worried about proving how much money we're going to make, but it's much more about identifying that there is a need, that there is ample funding for the need, that you're going to be able to secure the funding to do what you need you're going to do. Because especially if you're going to, in this use case, we're going to be, creating a business plan for a $25,000 loan, right? So your lender's still going to want to see that you're going to have what it takes to keep operating year over year. You're going to be able to secure funding or generate, income to be able to pay back that loan and then meet the mission that you're trying to. So our business plan needs to do a little bit of educating in this case. In a lot of for-profit businesses, I usually say the business plan doesn't need to educate because they're probably familiar with it. But in a nonprofit case, I think you do need to do a little bit of education and make sure that they're aware of the issue you're trying to address and who you think potential supporters are of your cause. And so we need to do that, but then also outline our roadmap forward. What's our roadmap to fundraising, for business development, for finding partners, for deploying the resources that we've, are collecting, and how that is going to make an impact. So I'm going to talk about that kind of at a high level. Again, try and look through this through the lens of your specific nonprofit and how you would kind of apply these things we're going to talk about to that, because it may be different for your use case. And I just want to try to help get the gears turning a little bit for you. So first thing I'll mention is you see here this table of contents. It's not super long. Okay. So a common misconception is that business plans need to be really long to be effective. And I think actually quite the opposite can be true. During my time as a lender, if someone would provide a really long business plan, then chances are the whole thing is not going to get read. A lot of it's going to get skimmed just from like a time saving standpoint. And so that means that some important details might get missed or might get overlooked. So if you need to create a much larger business plan to, get all your thoughts down in paper and feel like you're covering all your bases, definitely do that. But what you hand to your lender or potential donor should be a refined version of that. That really is just jam-packed of all the highlights and the important details so that nothing gets left out. So as we're kind of going through here, let's start out with the executive summary. Kind of think about this as like a cover letter for a resume, for a job application. So we want to talk about, who we are, what we're doing, where we're doing it, and how we're doing it is kind of really what we want to cover. And another thing to mention is the structure of this business plan template is you're going to have headings, and then you're going to be subheadings, and then you're going to have a brief description of what should be included in that subheading, and then like a 1 to 2 sentence example for our fictional use case. And so don't take this structure so literally that you might want to elaborate in more of these sections than what the template has. Like in an organization overview, like nonprofits tend to be very unique in the mission that they serve and the way they operate. So take some extra space to explain what you're doing and how you do it and the importance of what you're doing. Don't limit yourself to 2 sentences in those cases where it doesn't make sense. And then your organization description, you're going to talk a little bit about, maybe who founded the organization, your entity structure would be important to include in here. Who's your target beneficiary? Like who are you going to be supporting in the community? And yeah, so very important to include this information here. Not one of those 5 key points yet that I had mentioned. Okay, first one, your market analysis. Now that probably sounds a little bit more business speak, but I still think it does apply, right? So we're not going to be identifying a customer base in this case, but we're going to be trying to identify the group of people or the community that we think exists that we want to support. And we need to try to come up with ways. So the key point, you're going to overview that here. Industry, that's more like, what's the need? You're overviewing the need. Collaborators and competitors. Now, I came from the nonprofit space, so I understand that competitor is kind of a taboo name for things, but in reality, there's competitors, right? There's only so much grant funding, and there's multiple organizations that are competing for those grants oftentimes. And even if they have some nonprofits have overlapping services, and so that can mean the difference between being funded and not. So, but in this case, competition is good because the beneficiary are the communities that get to receive these resources. So it's good for there to be nonprofits, multiple, engaging in the same activity. So identify if there's any overlapping organizations offering similar things to you do, and how that dynamic plays out. And then again, targeting your target beneficiaries. So in this market analysis, typically what this would look like for a for-profit business is, let's show some tangible research that is evidence and supports the fact that we do think there's room in the market for that business or that product. So we're going to kind of do the same thing for a nonprofit, except we want to try and demonstrate some research and examples that the need exists to the level that we say it does, and that there is people interested in funding that need, right? And there's a need for that to be funded. And so you likely are familiar with, if there's any studies or research that's been done, go out and find that, try to secure that information. Maybe you've done the survey yourself, right? So any sort of empirical data you can kind of collect to support what you're saying, is the need, and you want to support that, include as much of that as you can. If there's any precedent for grant funding and different things that are happening in different communities, like maybe in a different state or a different city that's similar to yours, highlight those as examples that there's a precedence for what you're trying to accomplish and for those to be funded well, and include that. Now, this is like kind of a really poor man's version of explaining this. I would kind of do this in a for-profit version, but I'm going to try to do this in a nonprofit version, where this is a free tool. You can make a free Google AdWords account, and then they have a free tool called the Google Keyword Planner. And basically what this does is it enables you to simulate search volume for keyword search phrases. So I've said that our fictitious example, and I think we mentioned it's called Safe Haven, and we're offering like mental health services and counseling services to underserved communities. So we want to try and get some sort of a grasp on like, what is the need for those services in Minneapolis. Now, what I'm about to show you is likely not the best way to do this, but for the sake of doing this video, do some research, right? Talk to your local governments, talk to your local representatives, talk to other local nonprofits, talk to national organizations that are doing that type of research to understand, what resources they might have to be able to help you identify that need. So this is, again, a poor man's version to do this, but I've set my location as if I was in Minneapolis, and I want to see how often people are searching for things like mental health services near me, counseling near me, mental health counseling near me. Now, there's a long list of other search phrases. Now, what this is going to do is, one, recommend some other related search phrases, which are helpful. It's going to provide how often that's being searched per month in that area. And then it's going to give us some trend data. So this is helpful for us to see not only how much is that being searched there, and let's find out, let's see, we've got mental health therapist near me, mental health clinic near me, trauma therapist near me, teen therapist near me, psychotherapist near me. So you can kind of pick out the relevant ones to what your kind of mission is there. Because if you're not going to do marriage counseling or couples therapy, then that isn't relevant to your case. So you can look at how often that's being searched, because that could be, in theory, like a new potential person you could support each month if there was a service available. And then another one I want to focus on is the trend data. So if your claim is maybe that mental health is becoming an increasingly more common issue when people are seeking out those resources, but especially for maybe an underserved area, they're not finding those or they can't afford those, then we can see the growth there, right? So we can see that there is growth. Psychologist is up 85%, mental health therapist near me, 24%. So you can kind of pick those out, that are mental health services near me, up 50%, 3 months. So this is just one example of like a free tool to go out and just try to get some street level search data that's just raw that can kind of support that. But again, looking at studies that are being done by other nonprofits and organizations and any data that you can see from that fact, include that in your business plan to reinforce the market analysis. What is the need in your community? And then again, if you can find precedents of those organizations like yours being funded in other states and other cities, highlight that as well to demonstrate the fact that the people are becoming more aware and supporting organizations like yourself. So moving on to marketing and fundraising. Here, you're going to just talk about, again, the types of programs and services you're going to offer. What is your plan to continue to raise funding? I mean, when it comes to nonprofits, that's the name of the game. Typically, you're not going to be charging for your services, or if you do, like, why is it that you're charging for them? And maybe you're just subsidizing those costs based upon grants and donations and gifts. But talk a little bit about your strategy when it comes to identifying potential funders that are going to support your organization. And then key point number 2 is going to be, now if this was a for-profit business, we'd be talking about customer acquisition. Like, how are we going to actually acquire our customers? And in this case, I think you need to highlight 2 things. One, how are you going to acquire funders and financial supporters? And 2, how are you actually going to get those in need of your services and your resources to come to you and to engage with you? And so we want to provide tangible examples of both of those 2 things. So, that might look like outlining our ideas for a fundraising event, or maybe let's try to split those two up. So maybe for tracking down investors, you've already done some research and networking and reaching out to like high wealth individuals or organizations that want to get involved. And maybe you start creating a list of those people and those organizations and that they are interested. It doesn't even need to be like a dollar commitment, or maybe it is, but they say they want to be supportive of what you're going to be doing. And then, another example of how to maybe come up with an example of how you're going to get in touch with the actual people who need your services. You can organize a grand opening in the event and just try to build, event in the community to build awareness that your resources are open, going to be open and going to be accessible and going to be used. And then maybe connect with like the city to work on an initiative to get those resources accessible to kids in schools and, different things like that. So I would say the more detailed examples you can give to demonstrate that you're already working on connecting with funders and connecting with the people who are going to be utilizing your services is good, right? The one thing you want to avoid in your business plan is giving this mentality that or giving the impression that you're going to build it and people will come, right? People will come to support and people will come to use your services. Now that might be true in some cases, but you want your business plan to be a little bit more proactive. You have a game plan outlined to kind of hit the ground running. So moving on, your organizational structure and management. This can be, I guess, a little bit more focused on just on like the logistics of your organization. So where you're going to be located, what is your facility going to provide, your staffing plan and volunteers. That's a whole other thing, like how you're going to attract volunteers and be able to actually execute the services and programs that you're going to be providing. And then you've got obviously your governance and how's your board structure going to work out, and you're going to manage your finances and all of that. So key point 3 would be kind of your relevant expertise in this field. So you want to highlight, whether it's you or people who are on your team already, what relevant experience do you have to be able to know what you're getting yourself into, both in the actual field of the support and the resources you're going to be providing, that what you're doing and you're going to be effective at offering that. And 2, running and operating an organization. Now, obviously nonprofits are not the same as a for-profit business, but it does still take, strong leadership and business management expertise and just managing the financial aspect of the business and in the operation of the team. So highlight any experience you have related to those in the business plan, either for you or the founding team or any key employees you're going to have, that you guys are equipped to actually provide the resources and programs, but as well as lead and manage an organization effectively. So moving along to the financial plan. Now, financial projection is obviously a big component of this. We're a little bit biased being Projection Hub, but it is a very important aspect of your business plan. Probably the most important aspect when it comes to, from like a lender's perspective on deciding if they're going to make, a decision to approve funding for you. And so here you're going to outline things like your startup costs, right? So what do you actually need to get the organization up off the ground? In this example, we need 150 grand. We've already raised $125,000, and we're just looking for a $25,000 loan to get us all the way there. You can see our income projections. Now you're going to see some of the financial projections, like when it comes to a nonprofit, there's some different terminology around them, but sometimes it's safe to look at it through the lens of a for-profit business, because that's the most prominent example we have of running businesses, and just remembering the goals, that like the goal isn't to generate an excessive amount of profit, right? We can track profitability and net income, but that's not the ultimate goal, right? So that a lot of times is just going to get reinvested or distributed to the resources that are being provided, or expanding the team so you can, grow the capacity of the team to even provide more resources and do more things for the community. So keep that in mind, that it's not a no-no to mention a word like net income or profit or something like that in a nonprofit. But obviously the goal is just not to grow that, exponentially without continuing to expand our resources. So anyways, you got a breakdown of a little high level 5-year plan for like income and the profitability, quote unquote, and our overhead or operating expenses, some key ratios to manage the success of the organization, our monthly operating expenses, our overhead is going to be included in that. We have this as profit and loss statement. That would be what it is for a for-profit business. But, a lot of times that's called a statement of financial position for a nonprofit, and cash flow projection, statement of cash flows, very, similar to that. We have a break-even analysis, which I wouldn't say is super applicable to a nonprofit just because it's not the goal. But again, you can't run at a deficit forever unless you're just going to continue to support that with donations. And that's okay. So I guess the point being, it's okay if there's not a break-even point, right? If that's your strategies, is to just always continue to supplement that with donations and gifts and whatever that's going to be, that's okay. Just highlight that in your business plan. So all those charts and graphs, though, that I'll mention, they were generated with this template. We have a nonprofit projection template. It's available. You can get it down the link below. At the end of the video, I'll give you a promo kit so you can even get it really cheap. And just to show you really quickly, it's very simple. You edit the blue boxes here relevant to your situation. You're just going to put in, your different streams of projected income. You've got grants. If you have membership dues, other revenue, business income, and then we'll consolidate that down into your income calculation. You can have your operating expenses, so it'll include your overhead in here. Any salaried employees will go on here, and then it's going to generate, all of these charts and financial statements for you. Everything your lender is going to need, or anyone, potentially reviewing, like if your board needs a report, or, even potential donors want to see an annual report of sorts, or I guess this is forward looking, so that would be a little bit backwards. But anyways, that's still going to generate, your forecast for them if anyone's wanting to look out ahead instead of at the historical. So key point number 4, though, is not to create projections, because you need to have projections in there. Key point number 4 is to have realistic projections. Now, again, nonprofits, this is a little bit tricky because nonprofits can come in so many shapes and sizes, and the way they generate income is different. And so it's kind of hard to compare one nonprofit to another. So you just need to find, I don't want to give a specific example on what the number should be, because for your case, it might be very different. My recommendation to you would be just to go to Google, create your projections, and then some of the important metrics, the things that you deem to be important, go and just Google, or even use things like ChatGPT or Bard to search for comparable benchmarks. So for example, a ratio that's important to some nonprofits is an overhead rate, right? You don't want to exceed 35% overhead so that you don't become so overhead heavy that you're only funding the business just to take care of the overhead, right? You still have capital to deploy to different resources and different needs. And so that might be something you want to calculate and look to see where you're comparing to that. So just this, again, this is a little bit tough one for nonprofits, but as you are filling out and creating your projections, you're going to know what type of numbers are important for your specific nonprofit, and then just do specific searches, Google searches, chat AI searches to find out what would be typical industry benchmarks, so you can see if you're within the right realm of possibility or the right, right ballpark there. And so that is going to be key point number 4, but we're missing one. And then we've got down here demonstrating commitment. So this is going to be, again, nonprofit can be a little bit tricky to outline this. So I guess the for-profit version of this would be called skin in the game. And that would be an example, like if you're going to get a loan, the loan needs to have collateral, right? So the bank wants to mitigate their risk. Lender wants to mitigate their risk by having some collateral that if for some reason the loan wouldn't be paid back, they can liquidate that collateral and try to recover some of their money. And there's a similar that's going to still kind of exist for nonprofits, right? If you're trying to get a loan, they might want a personal guarantee of leadership or a board member, or they might want some collateral if it exists, if you have a building, that kind of thing. So demonstrating commitment is just be prepared that just because you're a nonprofit, a lender is going to say, no, it's okay, we don't need collateral. They're still going to require those things. So just be kind of prepared on like, what do you have available? Do you have leadership? Do you have governance that's willing to sign on to that kind of thing, to support that? And yeah, just be mindful of that. So there you have it. Business plan template, free business plan template for a nonprofit. Go ahead and grab that down in the description. As promised, here is a promo code PH20BP. It'll get you 20% off that nonprofit financial projection template. If you have any questions, reach out at support@projectionhub.com. We would be happy to help. And please like the video if you enjoyed this content, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks.